Hello, everyone. Welcome to the very first MarkLogic World session. I just have a few housekeeping items I wanted to go over before Justin starts. As Ken mentioned, we do have a MarkLogic World app this year. Please, we encourage you to download it. You can fill out the session survey by going to the session and just scrolling to the bottom at the end of the session. That is extremely important to us as it helps us plan already for next year. So thanks very much in advance for doing that. As Ken also mentioned, MLW17 with the hashtag, please tweet at us and take pictures. Also, just really quickly, don't miss out on all the great activities tonight. We've got Second City from 5 to 7 in the keynote room. We also have the Women in Tech breakfast tomorrow morning. And if you need a one-on-one appointment with any of our MarkLogic experts, those are going to be in W195, which is the room right behind here. You can stop by, and James will be happy to schedule an appointment with you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Justin.
Thank you, Carrie. First, good morning, and welcome to Chicago. So, I speak for everyone at MarkLogic when I say thank you for taking time out of your schedules to come join us here at MarkLogic World. My name is Justin McKeag. I'm a product manager at MarkLogic. And this is, I think, my 11th MarkLogic World. So I've been with MarkLogic almost 10 years now. And I've been able to see the company, the customers, the technology evolve. So what I want to do here today is twofold. So for those of you who are new to MarkLogic, I want to provide a baseline about our approach to data integration and the technology that we have that enables this approach. So for who in this room, is this your first MarkLogic World? Good. So that's a significant number. So what I want to do is I want to provide that foundation that will allow you to better understand the concepts that we'll be talking about the rest of the week. And then for you grizzled old veterans, who are the grizzled old veterans in the Thank you. I see some of you out there. You're not too grizzled, Dave. So for you, I'm going to call out some of the new features in MarkLogic 9. So I'll call out things that are new and how our story around data integration has evolved. So let me get my clicker here. So first, who out there enjoys filing taxes? I shouldn't see any hand. Apparently some good Samaritan accountant really enjoys it because for the past 2 years, that accountant has filed my taxes for me. Now, of course, this wasn't a good Samaritan accountant. This was a fraudster trying to cash in on my returns. And what they did was they filed just enough information to make it sound credible in order to get my return from the IRS. But the IRS didn't notify me in advance. They have a long waiting period, and I don't even know if this year's tax returns have been accepted. And I compare that to my identity fraud monitoring service that I purchased after the first time this happened. And with them, what they're able to do is notify me as soon as something suspicious happens. They can say somebody just did a credit inquiry. Somebody had just taken out a payday loan in your name. And the reason they can do this is because they have a more holistic view of me. They're not just seeing me as a tax filer, as a citizen. They're seeing me as an employee, as a borrower, as a lender. And being able to pull together lots of different aspects of my life in order to make better decisions. And those decisions they're making in real time. They're sending me alerts so I can act on those immediately. And really, that's the essence of what we're talking about here with data integration. Being able to provide a 360-degree view of everything in your business in order to make better decisions on that information. And what we have is an approach to data integration that's different. And you'll see a version of this type of slide throughout the week. So I'll touch on it briefly here in order to introduce some of the technology concepts that I'm going to be talking about today. So the first thing to notice is this is an iterative process. So we never want to talk about data integration as a static point in time. You're always integrating data. You're always better understanding your requirements. You're always getting new information. So we always want to think about data integration as something that's ongoing, and you're never done. And that's a good thing. So the first step in this iterative process is to load as is. So we heard this morning from Gary and David about how being able to have the flexibility to load different shapes, different sizes of data, different ranges of quality. The fact that your data is garbage is good information. And that's an important aspect to be able to maintain. The important part is getting that data into a state that's managed, getting it into the database where you can apply those governance and security policies. So once you've got that data in, the next phase is to understand what you've got. So because we have the flexibility to load whatever data you have in its most natural form, you now need a way to understand what it is. And with that, we've included many different types of indexes in MarkLogic that allows you to understand that data without having to predefine what you expect to ask of that data or how that data is shaped. So we get the data in, we understand what it is, we validate its quality, how it applies those policies. And the next is we want to have that flexibility to be able to incorporate whatever data is coming from upstream. But we also want to be able to deliver stable services downstream. So it's not just this, it's a free-for-all of data, but we want to be able to accommodate that messy, sometimes changing data. But we also want to be able to deliver services that are stable downstream. So at some point, once we understand our data, it's important to be able to model it, to be able to harmonize it, and write those definitions down. So this is the language that you use to communicate between the person who understands the domain model and the developers. We'll talk a little bit about how those models are instantiated in MarkLogic 9. And then finally, be able to deliver that data to the right customers at the right time. So this is partly a security thing, again, back to data governance, but also being able to write applications on that data. So this isn't just about writing queries, this is about building real-time operational applications. So with MarkLogic has a built-in HTTP server. We've got client APIs in Java and Node. So being able to tune that, how you deliver and analyze that data for your customers. Oops, wrong button. And again, because this is all managed in the same infrastructure, it's all governed under the same policies. And that's really important, to be able to have this holistic governance story about all of your data. And as I said before, the expectation is that things are changing. We never want to think about data integration as a static thing. You're getting new data from upstream. You've got a merger and acquisition. You've acquired a new company. You're trying to integrate their HR system with yours. So you could imagine all of the changes. There's a bug in the code that's producing garbage data. You want to be able to accommodate that data and note it, not throw it on the floor. So again, upstream, you're always getting new types of data, different levels of quality. Downstream, your business requirements are always changing. I bet you not a single person in this room has ever shipped an application where the requirements didn't change over the life of that application's development. And this is always happening. And you need to be able to flexibly try out new ideas. Be able to use the data in ways that allow you to do that experiment. So be able to fail fast. That's OK. It reduces the cost of trying out new things, taking advantages of new opportunities. And finally, the regulatory environment is constantly changing. Rules are being enacted, rules are being retracted, rules are being reinterpreted. This could be both the regulations from the government, but also your contracts. I mean, you've got internal policies about how your data should be managed. And this is changing all the time. So again, we want to be able to embrace this change. This is a fact of life, and we want to be able to take advantage of it. So MarkLogic is a sophisticated and mature product. So I'm going to be able to go neither broad nor deep today. What I want to do is I want to focus on 4 key areas of our technology. The first is the data model. We've talked a little bit about that already. The second is how we use that data model in order to deliver those real-time queries and analytics. And that's our indexes. I'm going to talk about security. Security is about sharing data, not hoarding data. That's what data integration is all about. And security is key to that. And then finally, how do you verify that security? And that's showing the regulators how you comply with that. So we'll start with the data model. So humans have been organizing data in documents since we've been writing things down. It's just a very natural way to organize data. And you can see, without even knowing what the specific data is on that form, you can tell how it's organized. You can tell that it's got labels and values. It's got different cardinalities. It's got different hierarchical meanings. It's got some pre-filled in, some things that you can put in yourself. It's got values like dates and social security numbers. It's got full text about descriptions. So really, this is a very natural way to organize data. And it's a very unnatural act to have to slice this up into normalized atoms and put this in a table, for example. So we find that the document model is a very natural way to represent data. And the document model is a first-class citizen in MarkLogic. So MarkLogic can store and query documents. And we use JSON and XML as the primary ways. And those JSON documents are very good at representing. So I'll take that police report that we just saw on the last screen, and I'll turn it into JSON here. And you can see that very well represents a hierarchical tree structure. And of course, in MarkLogic, we're not storing that suspicious activity, this noise complaint, as angle brackets in XML or as squiggly braces in JSON. We're storing these on disk as a very highly compressed C++ data structure. But you can still think of it as this tree structure. And so you can capture various aspects of this data. You've got rich values like that date. You've got geospatial coordinates. You've got hierarchies. So you can see that the type the threat is a type of suspicious activity. You've got rich text. And again, so be able to represent different aspects of your data in the same logical thing that you can pull back as a whole. So there aren't a lot of wasteful mechanical joins that you have to do in order to get back the various component parts of that document. It's all located in the same spot. Take that same whole with its own metadata. Keep that metadata, those governance policies along with the data itself. So this is a real advantage of that document model. But wait, you say, I don't have documents in my organization. We're not producing XML or JSON in our applications. But if you think about it, most data in the wild doesn't start or end its life as relational. Think about how SOA or microservices are arranged today. Those are built on the web, which is made out of documents. HTTP is a document protocol. So we're already sharing messages and documents in our organizations all over the place. Think about how your objects are aligned in your Java application, or how you've structured your ERD diagrams in order to build those relational schemas. These are all hierarchical document type applications. So even if you're not creating JSON or XML today, you probably have documents somewhere in your workflows today. So we could represent that noise complaint that we saw in that paper form in a document. But there's also other information that isn't really intrinsic to that document itself. So you wouldn't necessarily want to store everything about the world in each document. So for example, that noise complaint document that we saw is really a type of suspicious activity. And that's a fact about the world. That's not particular to this specific noise complaint, but it's a fact about the world. So what we want to be able to do is continue to add context to our documents, and we want to capture these facts. What we have is called a triple. It's another type of document. Again, we're a multi-model database. It's another type of data model. Again, we're a multi-model database that allows you to store these facts. In this case, it's called a triple because it has three types. It's got a subject. The noise complaint is the subject of our fact assertion. The suspicious activity is the object. And then they're joined by what's called a predicate. So in this case, is type. So imagine all the rich graph of context that you could have just by having these documents, hierarchical documents that represent a whole, an entity, along with this graph of related facts. So really, that's the key of the multi-model approach, is to represent entities in their most natural form in documents, plus all of the related context in these assertions of facts in triples. And we've built up our storage models and our indexes to support both of these types of data representations. But our noise complaint itself, our noise complaint entity, represented as a document, doesn't exist in a vacuum. Of course, no noise complaint can exist in a vacuum, but that's physics. That noise complaint is related to other things in our law enforcement activities here. So for example, a blue van might have been identified in the vicinity of this noise complaint. We can create a new document. Again, that we haven't had to predefine anything. We can create a new document that represents this blue van. It could have its license plate, the fact that it's blue, the fact that it has a dent on the left side. We don't need to predefine what any of those things means. We can capture that, and then we can start to make sense of it later. So load that information about the blue van, and then relate it to that noise complaint. We haven't done anything else other than that. There's a character named S. Shady, and he's known to have rented this blue van. So you see where this is going. We've got a rich graph of entities and how they are related amongst each other. So this is really the key to the multi-model approach to data integration, being able to have all of this context and information in the same place and be able to query over the various aspects of it. So some of these queries would be inherently difficult in other technologies. So think about, I want to find all of the other events that S. Shady or any of the groups to which he was associated with participated. So think of those types of recursive queries, or the queries where you would have had 50 different unions in SQL. Those are very difficult to do in other technologies. But with this, being able to take advantage of that graph and that document model, it's very natural. But you say, how are my developers supposed to know what data is there and how it's related? So what we want to be able to do is to define the meanings of those things. What does in the vicinity of mean? What is a blue van, and what are its characteristics? How is that blue van, which is an asset, related to other things like people and organizations and events? So taking that, extending that context, that graph model, we can now write down facts about the world. So we can write down our data model, and we can have multiple ones of them. It's not the fact that relational has a schema that's the problem that makes it inflexible. It's the fact that you're required to have exactly one at all times. Sometimes you need zero schemas. You want to be able to just load what you have, figure out what you have later. But often when you want to deliver those stable applications downstream, you want to define exactly what these things mean and where they're located and how they're related. So what we want to do is be able to create a semantic model for the definition of that data. And what we've introduced is a new way to do this in MarkLogic. So we've taken the techniques that we've actually practiced in the wild for years now, and we've rolled those into a core set of patterns and APIs. And we're calling this entity services. So remember, those entities, those are our nouns in our data, so the peoples, the places, the things. What you can do now is you can have a data steward, a domain expert, describe that model of the world in a way that makes sense to him or her. So write down the fact that a person has these common characteristics, and people are related to assets in this way, events are related in this way. So write those down in a way that makes sense to the domain modeler. When you store that description of the model in the database, it's actually distilled down into a graph of facts, a bunch of semantic triples. And you can do queries over that. So you can think of all of those DDL-type queries that you do in relational. Now we've got not just the mechanics of the database itself, but the context about the real world. So this person was defined by this regulation on this date. It was approved by this owner. You could imagine all of these things that you can now build out into this rich graph of assertions about your data in the real world. And what entity services allows you to do is take that graph, that data model, that semantic model of the world, and then use it to do things like build out code transformations. So I actually want to represent the canonical forms of my entities, the person itself with his first name and social security number. I want to represent that in my data. Now I can now build out a transformation that will automatically materialize that for me. I can build out indexes automatically. So again, this is about model-driven. So take the definitions of the data itself that's not inherent to any particular application, and use that to build out downstream tools. So again, we're taking the patterns that are already in practice today, and we're providing them in APIs built into MarkLogic 9. So if the data model is what affords the flexibility in MarkLogic, the indexes are what gives us the performance and the power. So if you were to crack open MarkLogic, don't do this literally, but if you were, you would see the guts of a search engine. And it's no coincidence because our founder was the main architect of the UltraSeek's enterprise search tool. So at the core is what we call the universal index. So this is the index that as soon as you load a document into the database, it will index all of the aspects of that document. And what are those aspects? So it'll index all of the words. And so just like the back of the book index, the inverted index will index the terms in the document. So in this case, we've got words here. We've got a blue, we've got van, we've got observed. And for each of those terms, it will identify the specific documents with their identifier in which those terms occur. So really, this is just like the back of a book index. But we don't just index words. We also index phrases. So now we can do phrase searches. We also index stems of those words and phrases. So when I search for observe, I will also find observing and observed. And this is language specific too. So we have language packs that allow you to do this stemming and tokenization in various different languages. We'll also index the structure. So this is a unique capability of MarkLogic. So in that same index that we're doing with like bread and butter full text search engine, we were also indexing the structure of those documents. So you can now do queries that take into account how things are structured in your hierarchical documents. We've also got values that are in the documents themselves. So in that type element or that type property, we've got the value suspicious activity, or we've got a specific date. And then we can also allow you to organize documents in collections. So think of collections as tags, a many-to-many relationship between documents and labels. So again, all of these are in this same index. So it's very efficient, and it's done the same way. And then finally, I'll talk a little bit more about this. We index the security permissions on documents in this index as well. And that's very important because this is always appended to every single query. Every single document access in MarkLogic, the database will automatically append the permissions that you have based on the role that you're using to query. So all of these are in this universal index. You can see why we call it universal, because it's really all aspects of those documents. So now what if we wanted to do a query, for example, which of the vetted SAR reports, so our suspicious activities, contain the phrase blue van? So how would this inverted index do that? Well, the first thing we do is we find the phrase blue van. We note the document IDs that phrase is found in. We want to get our suspicious activity collection, so all the documents that are in that collection, those that are vetted, and then, of course, always appending our security credentials at the end. And what do we do with those is we just do an intersection of those document IDs. And that intersection is very fast. Because we've done the work up front at index time, so for every transaction, every update you do, these indexes will be updated. Now, looking up a term in these term lists is really just an intersection of integers. And that's a very fast activity. So this is how we get those sub-second response times for sophisticated queries in MarkLogic. So now, what if we wanted to do that same query, but we wanted to limit it by those reports that were submitted before 2013? So of course we have that information about that we looked up earlier in our term list before. But you'll see that before 2013 is a difficult question to answer in this index itself. To do that, I would really have to go through all of the documents and see which ones are before 2013. We don't want to do that. So of course, what we'll do is we'll introduce a new index. And this is called a range index. And as the name implies, it's very good at ranges of values. So this is great for doing inequality comparisons as also aggregates. And what the range index does is it takes that same document ID concept and it provides two columns. So one is the ordered list of values and their corresponding document IDs in which those values appear, and then the inverse. So the ordered list of documents and the ranges and the values that they have. So what this allows us to do is to do very efficiently do those inequality and aggregate type queries. And it's the same concept. So when we resolve this query now, we do that. We'll resolve what we can from the universal index, and then get another list of document IDs from the range indexes and intersect them together. So same query we've got before 2013, and now we want to do within a region, in this case the airport. So we can define the airport as a very specific set of coordinates. And now we have specialized indexes that allow you to index geospatial coordinates, so latitudes and longitudes, plus all of the really complicated math that takes into account the spherical ellipsoid that the globe is. So again, the same concept that we're applying to different types of data, all within the same query language. So the important part here is that these are all composable. So you see we've got a full text search, we've got a date range, and we've got a geospatial query in the same query itself. And so this really simplifies the work for developers. The developers don't have to think about how all of these indexes resolve together. You write a query, and the language will optimize that away for you, or the engine will optimize that away for you. So what about all of that rich set of facts that we have, those triples, those assertions about the context of the world? So as you would guess, we have a specialized index for that as well. So you can combine those rich queries about the context of the data, plus all of the stuff that you've got from your range indexes, your geospatial indexes, and your universal index. So this is really the key secret sauce of MarkLogic is the indexes. So we've got the data model, the documents plus triples, plus the indexes on top of those. And that allows you to do real-time queries. And all of these indexes are backed by transactions. So even within a distributed environment, all these indexes, whenever you update a document, the indexes are transactionally updated with that document. If for some reason part of that transaction fails, all of the indexes and the document updates will be rolled back in that same transaction. So it's not eventually consistent, it's not partially consistent, it's always consistent. So David talked about this morning in his keynote the ability to project out of the documents and triples rows. So having that document view of the world is is convenient. We talked about how natural documents are for expressing human-readable data. But also, it makes sense to be able to project out rows and columns in order to integrate with things like BI tools. So what we've got is a new technology in MarkLogic 9 that allows us to project out of those documents and those triples into what essentially amount to relational views. And what this is it's actually an extension of the triple index. So you can see that cell in our relational view is indexed as a row ID, column ID, and a value triple. The details of that are not important to this, but the concept here is that it's now possible to project out of documents and triples relational views that you can now use for things that speak SQL. So how does that work? So again, we've got our documents over there on the left. We've got metadata. We've got the raw data. We've got something new called template-driven extraction. And template-driven extraction is the filter through which those projections happen. So we've defined our own domain-specific language that allows you to, at index time, project triples or rows into that index that allows you to get those relational views. And this is the same underlying indexing engine that's supporting Sparkle and SQL, and I'll talk a little bit about Optic. That's some foreshadowing there. So how does that actually work? So we've got our classic ERP master detail order and order lines over there on the left. And what you can do is you can define a template. And if anybody is familiar with XSLT, it's kind of the same concepts. And we can say this part of this document, I want to index as these columns in this view. This other part of this document, I want to index as a completely separate view. And I can join those at runtime. And again, these are all happening at index time. So I'm not changing my document data or the triples to represent relational views. I'm doing this all through this projection that happens at index time. So I get my tables for free while still maintaining the richness of my document data. So on top of that new index, those relational views, we've provided a new API. And it's a lens into that data. And because it's a lens, we're calling it the Optic API. So this is a language-integrated way of doing things like joins and aggregates. Traditional relational things, but also some of the graph type of queries that you've been associated with Sparkle before. So this allows us to bring those together into the same language. So this is just a snippet of the Optic API. But one of the important things here is that the Optic API looks the same in all of the environments. So in JavaScript, in xQuery in the server, as well as in the Java and Node clients. So you'll be able to write queries that look just like this. And the idea is to be able to provide some of these relational-like capabilities on top of that rich document data. So data integration is about sharing data, not about hoarding it. One of my colleagues was meeting with the CTO of a line of business at a large organization. And she was talking about how she didn't have data integration problems. My data is pristine. I understand it. The quality is perfect. It's everybody else's data that I have absolutely no idea how to interpret or to get. And given that she understood and knew her data, why would she delegate that to somebody else that she didn't know how they were enforcing their governance policy or how they were going to interpret her data? So it's very important that as part of data integration to be able to have confidence that your data is secure, understood, and available. So what we've done is design security into MarkLogic from the beginning. This isn't an afterthought. This isn't something that's on our future roadmap. This is something that we've had since version 1 of MarkLogic. And the three key pillars of security are confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So confidentiality is ensuring the right people have access to the data, and only those people have access. Integrity is about maintaining the consistency and importantly, the trustworthiness of that data. So being able to ensure that your data is correct and accurate. And availability, often people don't think about availability as a security capability, but if you think about it, if something that was screening out bad guys or something that was through which 85% of the world's derivatives were flowing, that going down is a security problem. Not having the right information available when it's needed. So first I'll talk about confidentiality. So the core to MarkLogic's security model is role-based access control. So a security administrator can create a hierarchical set of roles. And these are the roles that you think about in like LDAP or Active Directory. In fact, you can delegate the definition of those roles to LDAP or Active Directory, actually. And then for each of those roles, you can assign privileges. And privileges say what you can do in MarkLogic. So a privilege could be as broad as you can access this database or this app server. Or it can be as narrow as this particular built-in function can only be run by this privilege. So any code that relies on that function anywhere in the code will now be rejected because the user that's logging in does not have that privilege. So when a request comes into MarkLogic, the user authenticates. We've got various different ways of authenticating. And then the authorization is mapped to his or her roles. And so first, the privileges are assessed. What are you trying to do? Do you have privilege to do that based on your roles? And then permissions. So permissions are stored in MarkLogic 8 at the document level. So permissions are, can you read this? Can you write this? Can you update this? Can you delete this document? So every request that's coming in is being evaluated against the roles, the privileges, and the permissions. What we've done in MarkLogic 9 is to increase the granularity of how you can assign permissions on your documents. So rather than having it just at the document level, you can now say, for example, my unclassified users can only see the name of the person that was in my suspicious activity. Whereas my secret users can see not just the name, but they can also see the location that suspicious activity happened. And notice that I can use information in the document itself. So I've got CLS equals S for my secret user. I can use that to define that security policy. So I can say anything where that's not even JSON. So anywhere I see the CLS equals S, I can now assign that part of the document to this security, to this role. And finally, we've got our methods and informants. So we only want those to be at the top secret level. So again, the idea is to get a more granular view of security. So use that same built-in role-based access control, but have it at the sub-document level. And this can be the security policies are designed by a security administrator, and it's completely transparent to the developers. So as the developer is writing code, she will only be able to see the data that her role, that her query is running at, can see based on the security policy. So this is a really important innovation, and I think it's going to be very widely deployed. But security of your data is not just about when it exists in MarkLogic. So oftentimes, you want to be able to share data outside of MarkLogic. And that's where redaction comes in. So you want to be able to share data. For example, I want to give overall aggregated reports to my regulators, but I don't want to have customer-specific information in those reports. Or I want to set up a test environment that resembles my production environment as close as possible, but I don't want all my QA developers to have access to all of my sensitive production information. So that's where redaction comes in. So redaction is, just as it sounds, just like in the movies, redaction allows you to change the data as it's moved out of MarkLogic. So in this case, we could change all of the instances from John to Michael. And why is that important? Because you want to have the same referential integrity in your export as you had in your original data. So I want every single instance of John to now be Michael. So my queries will still be the same. It'll have different values, though. You can also do random. So we can randomize information. We can mask information with redaction. Or we can take it out completely. So again, flexibility. And the idea is that a security administrator can set up these redaction policies, and then a DBA can use those redaction policies to move data around outside of MarkLogic. So we've talked about confidentiality. The new advanced encryption capabilities span confidentiality and integrity. And as David had talked about this morning, it's important that you have the ability to secure the data on the disk, not just through the front door, also through the back door. That's what encryption does. It allows you to encrypt everything that exists on the infrastructure. So all of the data files, the indexes, the configuration, the logs. It allows you granular access to each of those. And again, it's that separation of concerns. So no one role in your organization can compromise the entire system. So the security admin will set up the encryption keys. We integrate with the popular key management systems. The sysadmin will have access to the files, but we won't be able to decrypt them. And then the DBA will have the security policy, but won't have access to the files themselves. So again, it's about the separation of concerns in real production enterprise class applications. And finally, in terms of security, we'll talk about availability. And again, that's having the data available when it's needed. Not just preventing unauthorized usage of it, but making sure that it's actually available. And this is a really key, especially for operational applications that MarkLogic participates in. So, brief refresher about the way we deploy MarkLogic. So we're a distributed system. So the idea is that you can add nodes to scale out. And this is a great part of our elasticity story, but it's also a part of our availability story. So each of those nodes can now have a replica of its data. And so if one of those nodes go down, a node with the replica data can handle that query. And then when that node comes back up, just turn the replication around, and it'll catch up. And again, this is all real time. This is always consistent. So in a running cluster, you can change the topology and not have any transactions be inaccurate. So we allow for on-premises or cloud backups, of course. That's table stakes. We also allow for database replication. So the ability to replicate your data asynchronously into a different data center. So this allows you to have global availability. So if data center 1 goes down, you can switch over your load balancer to put it over to data center 2. When data center 1 comes back up, again, turn the pipe around and have the other one catch up and distribute those. So again, this is about making sure that the data is available all the time. So now that we've loaded our data, we've understood it, we've modeled it, and we've secured it, how do we prove that lineage, that lifecycle, to regulators? That's where compliance and lifecycle management comes in. And this is an enormous topic all on its own. I want to give you the really tops of waves here, but it's a really important aspect of MarkLogic. So all of these capabilities are designed to work together. So the idea that we have this role-based security access, the sub-document controls, we've got the ability to have immutable history. So you can say, this document was loaded into the database, and it's never changed, and I can prove that. I can prove that at the disk level. I can prove that in the queries. But I can say, if we do have to change the data, I can now trace where that change came from, and I can go back in time, and I can say, at any time, what did I know, and when did I know it? So this is a really important aspect about not just being able to get a single-dimensional history of your document, but be able to say, what were the things I knew about this data at any point in time? And then be able to manage that as part of your infrastructure, so to be able to deploy the data and query it on the infrastructure that makes most sense. So you've got your hot data on your expensive infrastructure for the last 30 days. Maybe you've got your data scientists working on the last 7 years in something like Hadoop. Again, MarkLogic allows you to flexibly move the data to where it most makes sense in terms of your costs and SLAs. So this is a huge area that MarkLogic excels in because of all of those fundamental capabilities that we've brought together into a whole story around lifecycle management. So I want to make sure I have time for questions here. So what have we talked about today? So we've talked about our approach to data integration. It's an iterative approach. Be able to get the data, be able to understand it, be able to model it, and be able to deliver and analyze it. And that's predicated on these 4 key capabilities in the database itself, the data model. So being able to combine documents for entities and triples for assertions about the context about those entities. The indexes really allow you to do those composable queries. So be able to query along those different aspects of the data. And security. Security is built in from the ground up. And that's a core part of how we manage data. And then to be able to prove the lineage, the history of that data. So I would invite you to explore these different aspects. We'll go into most of these in a lot more detail in various sessions. So with that, does anybody have any questions? Mm-hmm.
Does that apply to the entire document or to a portion?
So the question is about lifecycle management and how that applies to the entire document versus portions of the document. Lifecycle management is, it's not one API or one index setting. It's kind of a set of patterns. And so that's about immutable history. That's about security. That's about configuration management. It's about tiered storage. So you should model your documents to represent the things that the entities that they represent. And so, and the lifecycle management policies are tuned around that orientation. So it's not like I'm managing this element and its children in a certain. you should put that coherent whole together in the document, along with its metadata, along with its canonical representation, and manage that as a whole. Did that? You don't look satisfied with that answer. I'd be happy to talk with you offline. Okay, so 2 questions here. So what's the overhead of encryption? That's always the first question we always get. And the second one is, what about assets where I'm storing the metadata in MarkLogic, but the asset itself is outside of MarkLogic? So the first answer, the overhead of encryption is negligible compared to the benefits you get from it. We've also done a lot of work with Intel to make sure that, that the way that we do the encryption is optimized for their chip architecture. So we've actually seen increases in performance in certain cases. So I wouldn't get too hung up on the overhead of the encryption itself. The benefits far outweigh the costs that you're going to have in that regard. In terms of securing the metadata, so MarkLogic can only secure the data that it knows about. So yes, you could say only certain users can see certain aspects of the metadata. But if the video itself is stored outside of MarkLogic, then you would have to have another way to enforce that. MarkLogic has a way of managing pointers to binary data, for example. You're talking about videos. But you could have that granular security on MarkLogic, but you would have to have some way of, overall, in the application architecture of securing those external resources. Any other questions? We've got one right here. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's a very good question. So the question is, how do we combine Optic with CTS queries? And so you can scope an Optic query by the results of a search. So I can say, only these documents that meet these specific criteria do I want to do aggregates over, for example, or get these specific documents, but then I want to join to other documents based on that set. So they're designed to work together. Yes. Yes. So the question is about entity services, whether that's new and does that provide data governance. So entity services is new in MarkLogic. And really, it's kind of a packaging up of practices that we've been doing in applications for years now. It's kind of taking the best practices of modeling your data, about harmonizing it, providing a canonical way to represent that data in the documents, and then being able to deliver that. So the idea with entity services is to define that model, use that model to then drive downstream processes. Like, here's how I materialize my documents, here's how I index them, here's how I generate those templates in order to project out into those rows. So the idea is to have this model-driven view of the world, and we're going to do a lot more of that in the future.
So what's for the new entity element security? What's the approach for applying that to legacy data?
To legacy data?
Yes, existing data that's in MarkLogic now.
So what you'll be able to do is define your policies in terms of the data you've got right now. So it's you can do things like, for this path, I want it to have this permission for this role. So that's just kind of another layer on top of the already existing security policy.
So it's not a re-ingest, it's just adding on to it?
It'll re-index those parts of the document. So it'll be efficient about what it needs to re-index. But yeah, it'll have to re-index those parts where you define new security policies. But it's designed to be layered on top of the existing way. So the question is about, I had a bullet earlier about the new SQL and ODBC implementation. So the way we've designed those, the indexes for the views, that underlies the Optic API, but it also underlies our SQL interface. And then that's projected out through the ODBC interface. So all of that now shares the same guts. So we'll be able to, as the optimizer improves, as we make changes to it, all of that shared infrastructure will bubble up automatically. So we've re-implemented completely our SQL. So it's got a new engine based on this new index and this new optimizer. Yes?
I'm a newbie, anxious to take the certificate.
Welcome.
Concentrating on 8, so now I should concentrate on 9. We're going to be adding that to the test anytime soon.
Yes, so MarkLogic University will be rolling out, so the question was about training and certification. So MarkLogic University will be rolling out training and certification specific to MarkLogic 9. Yes?
A question about redaction.
Uh-huh.
So in the example where you were changing the name from John to
Yep.
that consistently redacted from all different source systems, so private, the same record, so the same person coming from different source systems, would it be redacted the same way so that when we consolidate the data, it would be referenced?
Yeah, so the question is about referential integrity, I think, in redaction, right? Yeah, so out of the box, we provide a bunch of different redaction strategies, and you can write your own as well. And one of them is to make it consistent. So change the values, so not be able to determine what the original value was, but have it so that it's consistent. So every time you see John, it's turned into Michael, and you can be assured that your queries will still work the same. They won't have the same values, but the referential integrity will be the same. Then you can also do randomization, you can do masking, you can do a variety of different things. And really anything you can describe in JavaScript or XQuery, you can also implement your own redaction function if you've got special logic that you need to implement. Yeah, so redaction is designed for export. Right, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's a very important consideration. So the things that are in the indexes, so element level security and that role-based security, that's what will affect your query results. Redaction is designed to be that last mile after. So you issue a query, it'll filter that query through your security policy, and then redact it on the way out. So redaction is, yes, it's designed for export. So it's good that they're designed to work together, but they're different. Yes?
Even though it's designed for export, can it still be used for import?
For import, say more about that.
Like already have a legacy system, as you were saying, that is MarkLogic 8.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not introduced store base over there, right? I can bring the data in, but when I'm bringing it in and giving it to developers to work on MarkLogic 9, and I leverage redaction there.
So redaction is a capability of MarkLogic 9. So the out-of-the-box APIs are shipping with MarkLogic 9. So what you could do is you could update your MarkLogic 8, do the redaction, and get it into your production system. Or you could just take the same concept. So we've had people that have been doing redaction on their own that didn't call it redaction, but it's basically transform on read. So you could apply a transformation. It doesn't get the kind of the policy management aspect of it that comes with 9, but you could do the same technique on your 8 database. What I would encourage you to do is to upgrade your 8 database and then redact it from there.
So, taking the next step, what you showed earlier, you have 3 different types of users, 3 different redaction methods. They really are 3 different reads, and then you give it over. As opposed to go export 1, and then I can run 3 different.
So I think you're conflating the element level security and the redaction. So element level security is about providing access at the index levels to subtrees, so subdocuments. Redaction is about processing the entire document on its way out. So they're designed to work together, but they are different things.
Justin, I think we only have time for one more question.
Okay.
So, hi, this could probably be a really newbie question, but looks like MarkLogic is great at, searching a little bit of structured data like JSON or XML.
Mm-hmm.
But what if you are looking at completely unstructured data like free text, for example, the body of an email? How does MarkLogic handle that? And if MarkLogic doesn't handle it, have you seen any customers using any ingrown, homegrown tools to massage the data beforehand? And what do you recommend?
That's a very good question. So search is our lineage. That's where MarkLogic came from. So search is a very important aspect of MarkLogic. And even if you think of the data integration case, we talked about being able to load as is and accommodate data that you don't know anything about. And the key capability to be able to find without having to declare up front what's in the data is search. So search is key to both our data integration strategy as well as a lot of the document management and technical publications that a lot of our customers are doing. So in the guts of MarkLogic, we have a best-in-class search engine itself. So you've got the data management capabilities plus the search engine in the same kernel.
Justin, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you very much for attending this session. Justin's presentation and slides will be available in the coming month. You'll get an email. All the presentations and slides will be available on marklogicworldonline.com. Please fill out the survey. You can go into the app under the agenda, click on the session, and please give us feedback on that. Thanks very much.
Thank you.